servers were to do this, then I think it would be a safer way of doing redirects, and you actually couldn't exploit it because the server is giving you the exact page it wants you to give. Actually, so let me go back on and say one more thing about it. However, actually, it's not necessarily safer. First off, there's no business case why a server would want to do it. Two, it's actually not safer at all. If all the server script is doing is take the destination of the redirect, say, oh, you're going to cs.indiana.edu. I go to cs.indiana.edu on your behalf, fetch the page. That's actually a worst case, right? Not only are you, in the first place, wasting bandwidth getting people pages that they are wanting to get from your page. Secondly, I could be giving you pages that I never thought I would be giving to you. So the same situation as in you need to make sure your scripts are safe and have the boundary cases covered well would stay there.
Maybe in the same domain it would be...
I think that's the way.
So, well, basically the bottom line is if you want to prevent your server from being exploited, as in people think they're going to ebay.com when all your server is doing sending them elsewhere, you're wasting your resources too. That's a TCP connection that's happening and then HTTP and everything else. Then you want to basically write better scripts. This is along the lines of, buffer, just like you need to guard buffer overflow attacks, cross-site scripting attacks, and all other buzzwords that you hear in popular media about web security, you need to guard against this. So to answer your question, summarize the answer, I really don't think servers fetching you the page will be any more secure unless the server has boundary conditions done right, which is I should not be fetching pages beyond this whitelist, for example, which is the same thing as today. So even if the server is fetching page on your behalf, it's not preventing against this. Okay, that's a very good question. Okay, so to summarize this slide again, we basically found that it took us a while from simple redirects to do the test for open redirect. And it turns out that more than 80% were just open like that. We haven't even tried them yet, just open. Change the destination, it takes you to the new destination. Some were closed for sure, which is they just said refused. But 2 to 5% of the links were actually broken by the time we got to that. So the actual open percentage may have been more, right? Because this was done over a couple of months. Okay, so now we said these are redirects that are open just because the server script is not doing testing. But the rest, can we do something about it? So in this case, we just replaced the destination, left the rest of the query parameters, whatever they were. In many cases, the query parameters are the browser version, the language, and things of that nature. And maybe if you're searching, then there'll be a query string and something like that. So we used really as simple a set of heuristics as you could imagine to see if we can tweak the redirect to become open. And we said, drop all parameters except the URL. So if after the question mark, if you saw multiple parameters, how do you know there are multiple parameters in a URL? They're separated by an ampersand, right? So if you see multiple of those ampersands, you look at the ampersand that contains the destination in a simple dynamic redirect, and the rest you just drop. So you've basically made the URL smaller. You wouldn't think that would lead you to, that would cause the redirect to become open. It turns out it does in some cases. The other thing we tried was we altered all parameters, and let me go back to where I said what we did to alter. Okay, so somehow I don't seem to have written that down. How did we alter the parameters? We basically, if it looked like a character, like ABCD, for example, then we just dropped a character from the end. I mean, these are really, we did not expect anything would come out of it. Or if it was a number like 1, 2, 3, 4, then we just said 1, 2, 3, 5. If it was a number, we incremented the number. And if it was a character, then we made the string shorter. So what are the 3 things we tried? In the query, there are multiple parameters. We left the destination. We changed the destination, of course. The rest of the parameters, either we dropped them. The parameters generally fell I think all the parameters fell in two categories. Either they were strings or they were numbers. If there was a string, we made the string shorter by stripping off the last character. If it was a number, we just incremented the number by 1. Really, you would not think this would lead to anything. I mean, that was my thought, but this was the student's idea. Let's just see what the server would do. It turns out that about 2% of the links became open by this random manipulation. I mean, and this is by no means an exhaustive way of manipulating the characters, the parameters, right? Question.
But like not all the redirects actually do a URL rewrite, correct? Like you said, you'll have the key pair, like the destination is equal to the address where we're going, and ampersand the input values. But not every redirect actually uses a URL rewrite. I mean, some of the redirects, like you just click, you just see the new page, you don't actually see anything on the URL. Like what you do in a, if you use a post method or anything like that, you actually don't see anything in the URL. So is there any way you can detect, such kind of things like phishing happening?
What do you mean by you don't see anything in the URL? You do see something on the location bar, right?
Yeah, but that's like, it's not real. I mean, you don't overwrite it. You don't append anything to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you pass, whatever values you pass, that's not as a part of the URL string.
And what he's saying is you can pass on the parameters using the post parameter. So you won't see anything.
As in what we...
The URL remains
Oh, I
clean
see.
actually.
I haven't thought about that.
What we do when we redirect our website to Yahoo GeoCities page, as in suppose I am having xyz.com. So instead of buying web space, I redirect it simply to Yahoo GeoCities web space, but the URL remains www.xyz.com. That's what it remains.
Oh,
the
so
URL
that has to do with frames, right?
No.
No.
No, that's forward. It's forward.
Right.
I mean, basically,
It's not in the HTTP header the data and not in the query string, so that's why.
It's
So
like-
the HTTP header in this case would not contain, the response would not contain the destination you're going to?
actually like you could either do a redirect or a forward. If it's a forward, like as you mentioned, like the initial page remains in the URL tag. If you do a redirect, actually the request is again submitted.
Yeah.
So it's
So-
kind of a new URL.
So it sounds like, of course, those are not the things that would get detected here, right? We looked at, that would be an interesting case to think as we are expanding to get hold of all possible redirects. We did not look at static redirects. We did not look at cascaded redirects where one redirect leads to another redirect. We did not look at, of course, static redirects are not very interesting from this perspective because they can't be manipulated. And this would be another thing where even for a redirect where the destination is something in the URL and actual destination is something else. And this would be one example of it, right?
Actually, not exactly redirect, that would be a forward actually.
Yeah. Those would not get detected. It would be interesting to see if you can manipulate those too. Yeah. Okay. So what we found here is in basically 2% of the rest of the redirects, simple dynamic redirects that were not open earlier could be pried open with these really trivial ways of manipulating the string, URL at all. So at the end, we had 130,000 redirect links that were very, very susceptible. So how much time do I have?
Till 20, yeah.
Oh, it's done. Okay, well, so what can you do? Today, what do the servers do when they redirect? They sometimes warn you, but...
I have one last concern to ask. As in, it's our job to protect, right? So can you please walk us through the countermeasures that we should employ?
Yeah,
so,
okay.
So if we are just auditing any company's website, so we can use those.
Okay. So, well, today the server sometimes warns you you are being redirected, and some of the government sites actually do it more diligently than other sites. And, if you pay attention to them, great. If you don't, too bad. Users have a way of getting desensitized if they get too many warnings. Certificate warnings, who here does not ignore certificate warnings, right? I ignore them regularly, unfortunately. The other thing is that the server could have a whitelist. For example, I'm only going to direct, Google can say I'm only going to redirect to X